from the city that never sleeps. 17 miles from Madison Square Garden, New York City. It's America at Night with Rich Valdez, America's favorite late-night talk program, featuring interesting guests from around the world and calls from across America. And now, here is your host, Rich Valdez.
Hi there, good evening, and what's up, America? I am Rich Valdez, Valdez with an S, by the way, at Rich Valdez on all of the social media. And our telephone number, if you want to join the national conversation here, late night live, 866-505-4626, our legacy line, or, of course, 833-4-VALDEZ. Now, I want to get into what I think is arguably the biggest story of the day, and it's been the biggest story of the weekend, which is the shooting in Texas. And there's multiple angles on this story. It's a tragedy, obviously. 9 killed, children included. Just absolutely horrible. Happened in Allen, Texas, which is in the Dallas area. And horrible. And honestly, it was a not really trending story until the government said that they'd found some postings from this individual online, and that there were, let me see the wording that they used, because I find that interesting. Let's see here. Here it is. Listen to this headline. Texas mall shooter ranted against Jews, women, and racial minorities on an apparent social media page. That moment is when this story, the fact that 9 people were killed, children among them, and my condolences to those families, absolutely horrible. But it was until that time, and I find this in and of itself to be very disparaging. It's a disgusting phenomena, if you will. The fact that there's outrage now because they believe that this guy had interacted with accounts that were linked to white supremacy or whatever. And again, it's probably a stretch at best. The guy is a mentally ill Hispanic guy, Mauricio Gonzalez, who doesn't look like a neo-Nazi, doesn't have a neo-Nazi name. And I guess that doesn't, make you a neo-Nazi, right? I think I'm sure there are people that have interests that are not aligned with their own. I'm sure that's a thing. We see it in politics. We see it all over the place. So, you really could have a brown guy that is the face of white supremacy, I guess. You could have it. It seems unlikely to me that this guy would go on a shooting rampage because of that. And in reality, I think that the big issue here is that he was a former military man. And he didn't get out of infantry school because of his mental illness. And it was known that he had this mental illness. And again, if things were the way they were supposed to work, the way they're supposed to work, this might be something potentially that we could avoid, right? By understanding the situation better. But we don't know. And what's interesting is that the investigators haven't yet made public what drove this Army veteran, Mauricio Garcia, I called him Gonzalez, to open fire on the folks at that mall. But what we do know is that he was unsuccessful as a soldier, and it was because of his mental health issues. And I think there's really a need to focus on this area, right? Because you have to be a special kind of, you fill in the word, right? I'm going to use stupid. A special kind of stupid to think that this is normal and that this is because you can buy a gun, right? There's lots of people that buy guns. There's tons of guns in the country. People don't behave this way. Crazy people behave this way. And, as a kid, I remember the the slogan or the catchphrase, people don't kill people, or guns don't kill people, people kill people. And it made sense to me as a little kid. And there was always debate over that, and there's still debate over it. I mean, here we are, I don't know, 35, 40 years later from the first time I've heard those words, and we're still in the same place where we use this term gun violence as if it's a real thing, as if there are violent guns. And every time it happens, we bring up this term again, and we just stick with the word, and we allow it to become part of our daily lexicon, gun violence. Yeah, there's a phenomena, a pandemic, an epidemic of knifings, of stabbings in London, all over Europe. It's the popular way to get people in amongst many of the immigrants coming into that area, like the people who've taken over Paris. It's like a homeless encampment under the Eiffel Tower. And the same thing happened in Germany. And it's fascinating how that didn't happen. Germany 30 years ago didn't have this knifing problem. London didn't have this knifing problem. People weren't getting knifed all over the place. But it's on the rise, and it's because that's just the weapon of choice and the way these guys do their thing. It's not knife violence. It's those crazy people who have a knife in their possession. And I think that this is not a distinction without a difference. This is really important. We have to really figure out how to help people and stop people that are crazy. Right? I'm a proponent, and good thing I'm not running for president, but I think if people are criminally insane, we should have a place for those people. And I'm pretty sure there's people that will debate me and send me all sorts of stuff, and I'll get a lot of hate for saying this, but people have always criticized the United States for being one of those places where we have more people incarcerated than most other countries. And I would always argue, I think it's because we have a more effective system of justice, and because at one point we had these places called penitentiaries or homes for the criminally insane, because there is a population of people, right? Just like dogs. Most people see dogs and they love dogs, and they're just the most adorable, most loyal animal you could ever find. But there are some dogs that lose it for whatever reason. And not that they're trained to do that they actually do. Like family dogs that have been in the family forever, and when they get older, they just flip out and attack somebody in the family and maul them or whatever. It doesn't happen a lot, but it happens. And there's a fate for animals like that. And I don't see humans that behave that way any different. I really don't. I think that if you are a person, whether it's attacking children or, in this case, a veteran of the armed service who couldn't hang in the Army and came out and couldn't find the help he needed, I would hope he finds the help he needs. I hope there's medication for him. I hope there's therapy. I hope there's support. But if there isn't, then there needs to be a place for a person like this. Otherwise, the place that he's going to find is the place that he's at right now, right? And there's reports that the hero cop sprinted towards the shooter with the rifle to take him out. And kudos to the cop who did that. And there's some reports out about that as well, that the Allen, Texas cop who put the end to this by killing the shooter, or as in the words of his chief, who said he identified the shooter, neutralized the shooter, neutralized the threat, which I thought was that's the way it's got to be. That he really sprinted towards this rifle, and everybody else was running away. And I think that's the job, and that's what he signed up for, and we're grateful for heroes like that. But I want to continue our discussion on mental health, because the veterans are important to us. I think we owe them a debt of gratitude, and in so much as helping them and acknowledging them and honoring them, we have to support them when it comes to these issues of mental health. And straight ahead, I want to talk to Gary Sinise, who's been an advocate for veterans since you saw him as Lieutenant Dan in Forrest Gump. He's been excellent on this issue, and he's also going to be at the Memorial Day Parade in D.C. honoring veterans as well and the fallen. So we're going to chat with him a little bit straight ahead. Don't go anywhere.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. is America at Night with Rich Valdez.
All right, America, welcome back. And we're having a discussion on the military and the importance of supporting our military in the area of mental health and other areas. And obviously, there are some out there that are really familiar with these issues. You may know our next guest from his roles in movies like Apollo 13, The Green Mile, CSI New York, or his, I'm going to say, one of the biggest roles because it was such a big film and has spanned so many generations of playing Lieutenant Dan in the movie Forrest Gump. But actor Gary Sinise has really been changed by that role. And it was inspiring for him, so much so that he started an organization, the Gary Sinise Foundation. And this year, he's being honored to serve as the honorary Grand Marshal for the National Memorial Day Parade in Washington, D.C. Gary Sinise, welcome.
Hey, thanks for having me, Rich.
You bet. We were just talking about how important mental health are, really all veteran services, but mental health comes to mind because of this tragedy that we saw coming out of Texas. And I'm thinking, you know better than most what areas of support are available for veterans and what areas lack. And in your estimation, do you feel like there's enough support for veterans in the area of mental health?
I don't think there's ever enough that we can do for our veterans. There's so many veterans struggling silently out there. And you never know because so many of them just keep it to themselves and they never reveal what they're going through. And we're very proactive at the Gary Sinise Foundation in trying to reach out to people to make sure that they know that there are services that we provide and that there are other services that other organizations that I've supported over the years provide. We have to be proactive. It's a terrible epidemic, really, because again, you can be going along just fine and think that everything's fine with your buddy, and next thing you know, you find out something tragic has happened, and that's very distressing. I recently had another buddy of mine take his own life, and nobody really saw it coming. So it can be a silent killer, and we want all our veterans out there to know that there are multiple services that are provided for them, not just at my foundation, but there's so many avenues that they can turn, and so many of them don't seek that kind of attention. They don't seek that kind of help. They don't know it exists in so many ways. But there are services and support systems out there for you. And we don't want anyone to struggle in silence. We want them to reach out. And really, I think one of the greatest things, or one of the things that's most definitely needed, is for the military members, the brothers and sisters in arms, to take responsibility for their fellow warriors, and to always, be the buddy system out there, because the government can't do it, the nonprofits can't always do it, and I really think the biggest ingredient in saving someone's life or getting someone help is people that you are close to, and your family members, and your fellow service members. They need to always be checking on each other to make sure everybody's okay.
Folks, we're on with Gary Sinise. You're known as an actor and as an advocate for veterans issues, and founder of the Gary Sinise Foundation. Gary Sinise, what are some of the areas that the Gary Sinise Foundation does help? And, some of the things that you've been doing. I know you've been doing this for a long time, and you're involved in a lot of initiatives outside of your foundation. That's obviously why you've been honored as Grand Marshal of the National Memorial Day Parade this year. But tell us, some of the work that you're doing now.
Oh gosh, at the Gary Sinise Foundation, we have so many different services that we provide, and I'll tell you why we're so broad in our mission is because prior to starting my foundation, I was just pitching in wherever I could to help multiple nonprofits that are in the military and first responder support space. And they were doing a variety of things, and I saw a variety of needs out there. And then when I started my foundation, I wanted to just continue doing that, but within, one single organization. While I still support other nonprofits and help them raise awareness and funding and whatnot, I wanted to kind of bring everything under one umbrella. And having been involved with so many nonprofits in different spaces, I just said, well, we're going to do a lot of different things at the Gary Sinise Foundation. We have mental wellness programs. We support other organizations that are really working hard to provide mental health services. We have Gold Star family support. We build homes for our wounded service members. I've continued to entertain troops on military bases all over the country, and in the last 19, 20 years or so, have played just hundreds and hundreds of concerts to raise spirits and boost morale. And, quite often we'll go to a base right here in the States, and you've got, a huge number of service members that are deployed from those bases, but their families are still there on the bases enduring these long deployments. And we roll in and we lift the spirits of the children and the spouses and try to do what we can to make sure that they know they're appreciated. So we want all our service members to know that they're not forgotten, no matter if they're on the front page or not. They're always in our hearts, and we want to take care of them. I have a lot of Vietnam veterans, friends and family members. I go back to the Vietnam days and remember all too well what it was like when they didn't get the services and support that they needed, and how difficult it was for them to go off to war and then come home and feel abandoned by the nation. And we don't want that to ever happen again. That's why my foundation kind of grew out of a lot of different things. And we're almost at the end of our 12th year. We're going into our 13th year.
Wow. Well, let me just remind everybody who we're on with. We're on with Gary Sinise. You guys know Gary Sinise. He's all over the place in Hollywood and television. Apollo 13, The Green Mile, CBS's CSI New York, and, of course, Lieutenant Dan. And Gary Sinise is with us, where he's telling us about the work of the foundation and the importance of mental health and services with the military veterans community. But he's also been selected as honorary Grand Marshal for the National Memorial Day Parade in Washington, D.C. this year. And with that comes a concert. So we're going to learn about the concert straight ahead. I want him to fill you in on that stuff. Plus, I really want to get an idea from him on what it was like playing Lieutenant Dan and how that's really changed his career in many ways, where he's an advocate and an actor at the same time. I think that's a fascinating story in and of itself. Don't go anywhere. Straight ahead, we're coming back with actor and advocate Gary Sinise. Don't go anywhere. Plus your calls, 833-4-VALDES, 833-482-5337. Don't move a muscle. We'll be right back.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez.
All right, America, welcome back. We're on with Gary Sinise, the actor and advocate for veterans issues. And Gary Sinise, in addition to being named the Grand Marshal, the honorary Grand Marshal of this year's Memorial Day Parade, and it's going to be a big one. I see a lot, 5,000 people marching. But you're also involved in a concert that's going to be taking place on May 26th. Tell us all about it.
Oh, yeah. Well, thanks, Rich. My foundation is, we're doing so much all over the country. But this is the 50th anniversary year of the end of combat operations in Vietnam. and the return of the POWs that happened in February and March of 1973. So this is the 50th anniversary. There's commemorative events going on this coming weekend. But as I'm coming to Washington, D.C. for the National Memorial Day Parade and the National Memorial Day Concert at the Capitol, I wanted to come in a few days early to do a special Vietnam welcome home, a salute to service for our Vietnam veterans. So my foundation has gotten Constitution Hall, and on May 26th, doors open at 5 p.m. at Constitution Hall in Washington, D.C., and we want as many Vietnam veterans to come to that concert. It's a salute and celebration of them. Again, like I said, I have Vietnam veterans in my own family. I played a Vietnam veteran in Forrest Gump. I have great relationships with many Vietnam veterans. I've been involved with the Disabled American Veterans Organization for many, many years, and so many of their members are Vietnam veterans. We want to salute them, and that's what this May 26th concert is all about. You can go to GarySiniseFoundation.org, and right there on the homepage, and I'm talking to our Vietnam veterans out there, if you're going to be in the D.C. area, please come to the concert. Go to GarySiniseFoundation.org and look us up there. You'll see right there on the homepage, Welcome Home Celebration for Vietnam Veterans. Click on that, and it'll tell you how to get seats and all of that. And then right after that, there's a candlelight vigil at the wall, the Vietnam Memorial there.
Yeah.
So people will be leaving the concert and heading over to the wall right after that.
Now, Gary Sinise, you mentioned right now playing Lieutenant Dan in Forrest Gump, and this role that changed your life in many ways. But tell us how it actually happened, because I find it fascinating. Right, you've had this great career as an actor, a working actor, and you'd think that's interesting enough, right? There's a lot that goes on when you get to play these different roles, but yet you have this one role that really changes you. Walk us through it.
Well, I hadn't done that many movies, Rich, up until that point. I'd done a Mice and Men was a movie that I did with John Malkovich. I produced it and directed it and was in it. Did a couple other movies, but not that many. And in 1993, I had the opportunity to audition for Forrest Gump. And like I said, with Vietnam veterans in my families and having gotten involved with supporting Vietnam veterans groups in the Chicago area back in the 80s, when the opportunity came along to audition, I very much wanted to do it. And I was lucky to get the part, and it was obviously it was a career changer because I hadn't done that many movies before. And it was a, big film that year. We won the Oscar, and it was, I think one if not the biggest film of the year. So when you kind of come out of nowhere and you're in the biggest film of the year and you have a good part, it can change the career. And after that, I did get offered additional roles, and I did Apollo 13 after that, and did Ransom after that, and with Mel Gibson, and got to play Harry Truman, and just did a lot of good things after Forrest Gump. So it was a career-changing role, but it was also a role that brought me to the Disabled American Veterans Organization back in 1994, and I started supporting them after they invited me to their national convention that year, and they gave me an award for playing a disabled veteran. And I've been involved with them now for nearly 30 years, supporting them. So I really credit, getting involved with the DAV with, the origins of my work with our wounded and how that evolved over the years to a full-time mission.
And what, how do you see the role of, your outlook on things, whether that's culturally, politically, a conservative view, What type of role has that had in the way you've chosen to guide your career? Because I know being a conservative, being a patriotic, you don't see every actor out there doing this type of work. And I feel like in Hollywood, it could be more of a hindrance than a benefit.
You know, I made my first trip to Iraq to support the troops and to visit them in 20 years ago. It'll be 20 years in June since my first trip to Iraq, and that was galvanizing. I mean, really, when I went over there, and this was about 2 months after the initial invasion, and I remember when the statue of Saddam Hussein was kind of pulled down in the square in Baghdad, and that was in April of 2003, and I was in Iraq 2 months later and visiting our troops. And then I went back again 6 months later in November. And in between there, I went to Italy to visit our troops, and I went to Germany to visit our troops, and I went to Walter Reed, and I went to Fort Stewart and San Diego, and I was just all over the place. I just wanted to be a part of supporting the men and women who were kind of reacting to what had happened on September 11th, in a way, and that was galvanizing again, and it just made me want to do more of it. And I became, very, very active in supporting our troops and supporting nonprofits that were supporting our troops. And I started a program called Operation Iraqi Children, where we were sending school supplies, hundreds of thousands of school supply kits over a 9-year period to our troops in Iraq, Afghanistan, all over the world, so that they could take those supplies out and give them to the children in the villages that they were, passing through. And it was a good hearts and minds effort, I thought. Much like our GIs walking through bombed out Germany, handing out chocolate and pencils to the kids, we were providing our troops with school supplies so that they could extend their hand of friendship. And all those efforts just led to a broader effort. And, I got pretty well known for being a guy who, goes out there and supports the men and women who are defending us. And all of that manifested itself into the creation of my own foundation. And, I think I've tried to do my best there and let the chips fall.
Good for you for putting the mission first. I know a lot of people out of Hollywood, they take an approach where, it's pro-America, conservative, what have you. And the next thing you know, they feel like they're getting blacklisted, and it takes a lot of courage. So I appreciate what you're doing for all of our veterans, men and women out there. Gary Sinise, let everybody know again where they can get the tickets for the concert and support the great work you're doing.
Yes, if you're going to D.C. For Memorial Week on May 26th at Constitution Hall, we're going to have a Lieutenant Dan Band concert, and we're also going to have Medal of Honor recipient Sammy Davis, who will be speaking to the crowd. Joe Mantegna will be our master of ceremonies that night. One of the POWs, Lee Ellis, will be speaking. Steve Amerson will be singing. And then my Lieutenant Dan Band will be rocking out everybody. You can go to GarySiniseFoundation.org, and right there on the homepage, you'll see the celebration for Vietnam veterans on May 26th. And just click on that, and it'll show you how to get seats. It's a free concert, so we hope to fill it up, and we hope a lot of people come. And again, all free, supported by the Gary Sinise Foundation, and of course our generous donors who donate to the Gary Sinise Foundation.
Well, it sounds like a great time celebrating America and America's veterans, America's fallen, and honoring that legacy. Check it out, folks. GarySiniseFoundation.org. GarySiniseFoundation.org is the website. Gary Sinise, I want to thank you for what you're doing. Godspeed to you, and thanks for being here and staying up late with us.
Thanks so much for having me, Rich.
You bet. Take care, and we'll do it again soon. Folks, straight ahead, we're going to continue our discussion and analysis on all of the breaking news related to the shooting in Texas over the weekend. There's new information out. Is it real? Is it fake? We're going to get to the bottom of it right here. Don't go anywhere.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez.
I want to listen to you, Rich, all the time.
America at Night with Rich Valdez.
All right, America, welcome back. We're taking your calls on this topic and everything else we're discussing. 833-4-VALDEZ, 833-482-5337. And what I wanted to circle back to was some breaking news on the shooter. Right, we have some breaking news on the shooter. Again, we know the shooter is a former military person that was not successful in getting through the infantry school in the Army, and now has killed, I'm seeing reports for 8 people or 9 people, as young as 3 years old, and that, they're saying some of the people that he shot were of color. He himself is of color. It's fascinating that this is where we are. And again, these details only matter when that's part of the issue. And I think that's what the FBI is trying to make the issue, trying to say that this guy was motivated by white supremacy and that he was, in fact, part of a group. SS lightning bolts and the swastika over his heart. Now, TMZ is reporting that this image, there's an image with on his bicep, it says Texas, and then he's got these lightning bolts and the swastika, but they don't show his face. I don't know if that's him or not. I don't know if it's real or not. And I think that's where people are skeptical because, it's not like the FBI has the most stellar reputation. I wish they did. I'd love to support them. I've got family in federal law enforcement. But lamentably, we've seen things be contorted into things they're not. Right, so we'll keep an eye on this. But this is what they're accusing him of now, of having these tattoos. And conveniently, the picture that they're displaying of all places on TMZ is without the guy's face. There's also social media that allegedly belongs to the guy that has a picture of some body armor. And the body armor has the Punisher skull over a Texas flag, and the Punisher's skull next to another patch on the bulletproof vest that says RWDS, which they're indicating on TMZ to mean Right Wing Death Squad. Now, I can only imagine that people of all walks of life fall susceptible to different things, whether it's falling into gang life like Bloods or the Crips or MS-13 or any of those gangs, or a gang like this one, if that's in fact the case. It seems very atypical to have a guy with a man bun or a ponytail named Mauricio Garcia, and to be accepted into a group of guys that would have lightning bolts and so I guess it makes me wonder: has the white supremacists or the neo-Nazis, have they now become woke? Are they also employing diversity, equity, and inclusion tactics in their recruitment? Are they saying, you know what, in our mission for the Aryan nation and to promote white supremacy, perhaps we need to diversify our look a little bit and bring in, some Latino flavor, maybe Latinx flavor. I don't know, and I don't mean to make light of the shooting. I'm making light of this bizarre story here that this guy is the brown face of white supremacy. It sounds contrived to me, and again, I got nothing to gain or lose by by being skeptical on a story like this, but I've been around long enough to know that every now and again you see stories like this, and in a few months it turns out, oh, this was not reported right or whatever. And I don't know if it is or isn't, but I do know I had questions surrounding the shooting that occurred in Kenosha, Wisconsin, when the media told me that Kyle Rittenhouse had, taken a rifle over state lines, that it was illegal to possess, and did so with the purpose of being a vigilante in Kenosha when he was in Ohio or whatever and whatnot, and then through an entire trial and a jury of his peers, one fact after another came to light that proved him innocent and proved that the guilty party was the media for lying to America, turning this kid into some vigilante killer when it turned out his parents were divorced and his dad lived in Kenosha, and that he was involved in the community and cleaning graffiti in Kenosha, Wisconsin, and was involved with like safety patrol groups and whatnot, and that he did have a rifle that he was legally allowed to have, use, and possess and whatever and whatnot, and was cleared of any crimes, and ended up suing CNN and the rest of the media for how they've maligned him, and won, so these is in the process of winning or whatnot, or had a settlement. So I look at that and I say that's just one of the most, not most egregious, but one of the more recent examples. You also had Nick Sandman, right, where that kid, they had the video of him, and it was made to look like, by starting and stopping the tape at a certain point, like he was somehow harassing a Native American, when it turned out to be the other way around, and the media trashed this kid who was on a school trip with his Christian school from Covington, Kentucky. And again, same thing, totally turning the story around to make it look like this kid was the evil white supremacist getting in the face of the Native American. And again, I'm not pro-white or pro-Native American. I'm just saying the media lied, and this kid had a huge payday when he sued the media. And the media doesn't always get it right. And I know there's people listening right now that are saying, hey, Valdez, you're part of the media. Yeah, but I'm a big enough boy to say sometimes we get things wrong, and that's why I don't jump on the first story I see. Anyway, more to come straight ahead. I'm Rich Valdez.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. America at Night with Rich Valdez.
All right, let's go to our buddy Paul in Zanesville, Ohio, WHIZ. Paul, go right ahead.
Yes, Rich. I'm just a little incensed. I'm upset about this white supremacy stuff. I'm a white guy. You should take that guy, hang him in a public square in Washington, D.C., I don't care what color you are, and say, this is what's going to happen to you when you do this to our children and our people in the United States, Rich. I'm very upset.
Yep.
I'm tired of being called a white supremacist, a Nazi or whatever. I am nothing like that. I have biracial. My brother-in-law's the biggest, blackest dude in the city of Zanesville. I am sick of it. That guy was a nut. And
Yep.
we have to do something about this mental health issue. And you and I talked about the red flag issues. Well, maybe it's not that so much, Rich. That's where a little disagreement is. But let's do something about mental health and stop this kind of stuff. It's not white supremacy.
You're right. Thank you, Paul. It's all about mental health, in my opinion. They're trying to make it about white supremacy being the biggest thing hurting us in America. I don't know if that's necessarily true, but we're going to continue our discussion on the media. Don't go anywhere.
Live from the city that never sleeps. 17 miles from Madison Square Garden, New York City. It's America at Night with Rich Valdez, America's favorite late night talk program, featuring interesting guests from around the world and calls from across America. And now, here is your host, Rich Valdez.
Hi there, good evening, and what's up, America? I am Rich Valdez, your liberty-loving Latino amigo, and our telephone number, if you want to join the conversation here, 833-482-5337, 833, the number 4, my last name, Valdez. And make sure you chime in at Rich Valdez on all of the social media if you have a comment there, or you could give us a call. I want to quickly go over a couple of headlines here because obviously it's been a very, very busy news day with lots of information coming out. There's a big discussion over something that's near and dear to my heart. Airlines might soon be on the hook for delayed and canceled flights. Yeah, good. They should be. Now, listen, I realize business has, nuance. However, you can't just sell a ticket for one price and then go, yeah, guess what? We decided to cancel it. You can take a refund or a credit from now till, the next year or so and just leave people stranded in airports. You just can't do that. It's not cool. And that almost happened to me recently, so I understand. Thankfully, I was able to make some moves and, get on the next plane the next day, not even like later in that day. But that's another story for a different day, or at least for a different segment. We also have some other stories about Biden's accuser, Tara Reade, posting cryptic messages about death ahead of her potential congressional testimony. But that's being largely ignored by the media for lots of coverage about E. Jean Carroll, which we'll talk about at the top of the next hour. And with respect to the media, we've got the White House banning the New York Post from a Biden event, just as there's a lot of talk about Hunter Biden potentially being indicted. So we're going to keep you up to speed on that story as well. But the White House press office is barring the New York Post from attending President Biden's only daytime public event as federal prosecutors near a decision on the criminal charges against his son, Hunter Biden, for tax fraud and some other crimes related to lying on an application for a handgun. So I just think who does that, right? I mean, this is like the equivalent of burning books when the White House bans a particular outlet. But anyway, when it comes to the media, I mentioned it before and I'll mention it again. There's just so little that I expect from them because lamentably it's I don't want to say they're a dying breed, but good journalists, good columnists, good, real fact checkers who used to be called journalists. They're few and far between, and we try to bring the best ones we can on this program because you deserve to hear the best. And Cal Thomas has been a columnist forever, and he's a pro. 50 years he's been in journalism in America, and he takes us on a road trip with his new book, and I want to get to the bottom of it with him. Cal Thomas, welcome to the program.
Thank you, Rich. Thank you for that introduction. Nice to be on with you.
Oh, likewise, sir. Thank you. And, your new book, Watchman in the Night, is really what I believe journalism should be at night, day, whenever, right? I think journalism as a whole, at least as our constitutions put it, was to be the watchdog for the American people. And it seems like that's no longer the case. They kind of write the story literally and the narrative to go along with it. Cal Thomas.
Yes, that's exactly right, Rich. And it's certainly not the journalism I started out with at NBC News in Washington as a copy boy in the 1960s. These were great journalists who had come over from newspapers or wire services. They wrote their own stuff. They covered hearings. Yes, probably most of them were Democrats, but they were fair in their coverage. I remember David Brinkley, who was one of the great journalists of the time, said it's impossible to be objective, so we must try to be fair. But fairness has gone out the window. As you suggested, it's all opinion now. The newspapers have opinion sections, but the front page has become opinion in the way they don't cover certain stories. As you mentioned, the New York Post being banned. The New York Post was banned during the last election cycle for reporting the truth on the Hunter Biden laptop and a lot of other things. Mm-hmm. And after the election, of course, they said, whoops, oh, well, that's history and all that. So most of journalism today has become advocacy. And what I try to do in my new book, Watchman of the Night, is to look back over my almost 40 years as a syndicated columnist and point out some of the things that have violated what used to be standards in this country. Now all standards are being rejected, moral standards, economic standards. Look at the debt, $31 trillion and counting. Biden's got this meeting tomorrow with McCarthy and a bunch of others, but that's not going to go anywhere because the left has played games with the debt and the debt ceiling for years.
Mm-hmm. and it's all about moving the goalpost. And I think what's frustrating to me when it comes to the media, right? You look at a situation like this, and you've got, I think they're trying to have a serious negotiation. At least I think McCarthy is. He's trying to tie it to lower spending, trying to do the right thing here, and the other side seems to just say, no, we just want to spend more so that we could placate more people and do what we have to do with whatever it takes kind of attitude. And then they have the cover of the media. The media will go out there and repeat the talking points of America must maintain the full faith and credit of America. Yeah. Don't allow America to default, and yada, yada, yada. And it's like, where is the one voice that's not like that?
Well, one of the benefits of being in this business for a long time is you get to see a lot of these things repeated. This business about the Republicans going to do away with your Social Security. This has been going on since the Franklin Roosevelt administration. The Democrats have played this game. It's like Lucy and the football. This time, Charlie Brown, I'm really going to hold it. This time, things are going to be different. The debt is unsustainable. No nation has ever been able to sustain itself with this kind of debt. And yet, as you say, the spending continues. Ronald Reagan had one of the great lines on this. The only proof of eternal life in Washington is a government program. It's true. It's easier to kill a vampire. And the analogy is good because both suck the lifeblood out of their host.
100% true. Oh, my gosh. Folks, we're on with Cal Thomas, syndicated columnist and the author of the new book, A Watchman in the Night. And he's taken us on a trip, a little bit of a road trip over his 50 years in journalism, 40 years in syndication, talking about American life as a watchman on culture and politics and looking to see how things pan out over from one decade to the next. And so far, it's been an enlightening discussion. Cal Thomas, I want you to stick with us. When we come back, we're going to continue your discussion on the book and the state of affairs and of the media in our country. And if you have a question, comment, concern with our guest or with the program, 833-4-VALDEZ is the phone number, 833-4-VALDEZ.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez.
Well, thank you, Rich, and thank you for everything. I know you very well, and I listen, but I have a lot of people that listen, and they love your show, and I appreciate it very much.
America at Night with Rich Valdez.
Why do you think your polling is where it is?
Well, I don't think people, by the way, every major one who won re-election, their polling numbers were mine are now.
Put polling aside then, right? Sentiment in this country, despite all these wins, is not very good.
I think all they've heard is negative news for 3 years. Everything is negative. I'm not being critical of the press, but you turn on the television, the only way you're going to get a hit is if there's something negative. You don't, anyway.
Okay, that's Joe Biden, as I like to call him, Joe El Baboso Biden. And he says that, look, the reason his poll numbers are in the tank, which they've been, I don't know, forever, is because the media is not fair to him. It's negative, negative, negative. I don't know if that's entirely true, but our guest Cal Thomas is going to give us his 2 cents on that. He's the author of A Watchman in the Night. Cal Thomas, what say you?
Well, Rich, I think this is just a daily reminder that we have a president who is in mental decline. It's just not true that the media have been negative, negative, negative. They've been positive, positive, positive. They helped get elected. They were anti-Trump from the beginning, and that's just a fact. It's not debatable. I mean, the media has been on the side of the Democrats because, as all the polls have shown over the years, the overwhelming number of so-called journalists and media types from Hollywood to Washington are liberal Democrats. They say it openly. They're not embarrassed about it, and their coverage reflects that. As you indicated in the previous segment, they begin with a narrative, and then they look for things that help support that narrative, and they ignore a lot of stories. Again, the Hunter Biden laptop was ignored and suppressed. And they don't talk about the debt. They don't talk about our crumbling foreign policy. They don't talk about our lack of respect around the world. Even Xi Jinping, the president of China, has said he views America as in decline. I think there's a lot of evidence for that. And who's been presiding over the government for the last almost 4 years? It's been the Democrats and their willing accomplices in the media. So you listen to Biden's interview, and they're inarticulate. They make no sense at all. The only person in Washington who is less articulate than Biden is his vice president.
Oh my goodness, yeah. I people say, "Oh, that's what keeps us, protecting him is because we don't want her." And I think, man, what a great opportunity it would be for her to run for president against anybody, right? I mean,
yeah,
this would be such a robust discussion.
Well, I think something's going to happen between now and early next year. I just don't see the Democrats supporting Biden for another term. He'd be 82 if he were reelected. He'd be 86 at the end of a second term. The new Washington Post ABC poll is astonishing. Most people now, even most Democrats, a majority of Democrats don't want him to run. And on the Republican side, it's the same thing. They're not looking for a rematch between Trump and Biden. They're looking for a new generation. Jack Kennedy said in his inaugural speech in 1961, the torch has been passed to a new generation. I think that's what a lot of people are looking for. They're not looking for 70 and 80-year-olds to be president. We got a lot of younger people out there in their 40s and 50s who are vigorous and who are intellectually capable and very articulate. And I think we need to turn the page on all that stuff and begin all over again.
Could be. I mean, I'm of the opinion that the idea that everybody's too old is in and of itself a little bit of one of those ideas that the media contrives. I think there's plenty. Look at you, and I don't know your age, but I know you've got 50 years of experience in observing American politics, right? But I look at me, and I've been observing politics for 20 years, but most of my time I was in government service or private industry, and I've been in radio for the last 5 years, and there's a lot for me to learn about radio and the media that I could turn to a guy like you and ask. And I think there's a lot of
you're
value
doing a good job.
in your. Well, thank you, sir. And I think I look at you and I say, you've seen this from a different perspective than me. And that's really the setup. It's a perfect setup for the next question, which is, as we look at so much of this, and you alluded to it in the first segment, where there's so much of the playbook that gets repeated. And while there's nuance here, like Biden's age, his mental decline and whatnot, a lot of it's standard, right? And it's just, we're seeing more of it, I think, because of social media, perhaps, and also because I think Biden's been extraordinarily weak as a leader. But what are some of the reoccurring themes, I guess, you've seen over your 50 years and part of what you outline in your book, Watchman in the Night?
Well, one of the great cliches, of course, is that I'm from the government. I'm here to help you. I think that people turn to government in too many cases now, Rich, as a first resource instead of a last resort. The 30th president, Calvin Coolidge, said, "You don't build up the weak by tearing down the strong." Those kinds of ideas have almost evaporated for our culture now. It's kind of a perversion of the 23rd Psalm. The government is my keeper, I shall not want. If you look at the ads during the last Medicare open season, I live in Florida now, no state taxes, thank you.
God bless
you. Yes, that's right. And all of the ads had 4 common words: free, entitled, benefit, and deserve. Now just think about that. Free, entitlement, benefit, and deserve. What you have now from the left and have had for some time is envy of the successful. You may remember Biden recently proposed he wanted to subsidize people with bad credit so they could get mortgages by increasing the mortgage rate of people with good credit. I mean, that's just absolutely crazy. How did that happen? So what you penalize, you get less of, and what you subsidize, you get more of. And the government is about, at least under the Democrats, is about addicting more people to government because that furthers the politicians' careers. It's as simple as that. It's been going on for decades. But we, the people, are at fault for electing these people. Look at our major cities. They're going to pot. Chicago, Los Angeles, San Francisco, New York. Crime, but people keep electing the left-wing Democrat mayors and expect different outcomes. That's the definition of insanity.
100%. And I feel like, earlier we talked about you brought up this ABC poll, or WAPO poll, and it's fascinating to me that we're finally at a place where the Democrats and what they promoted, I think they're saying, all right, it was cool when we didn't have it, but now we have it, and it's really bad. It's really bad, and we can't afford to do more of it, so we've got to do something else. And I don't know if they're priming the pump for a Gavin Newsom or for, people keep talking about Obama, but I can't see Obama taking a pay cut, any of the Obamas, Michelle or Barack, to get back into public life. What do you think?
Well, I think Obama's really running the game behind the scenes. I mean, look at the people who are holdovers. Susan Rice just left, but she was a major factor in the Biden administration. Sure. It reminds me of the Middle Ages where they had these 12-year-old kings and the real power was behind the throne. Biden doesn't know what's going on day to day. He has these cheat sheets always that he's looking at. He didn't remember that he was in Ireland just a few weeks ago when he was asked by a child and had to be reminded. His wife, Jill, pulls him off the page sometimes. During an interview with MSNBC just a day or two ago, a staff member interrupted the interview because the staff member didn't like the question and didn't want him to answer it. I've never seen that in all my time in journalism. I've never seen a White House staff member interrupt an interview. That's what we have as president right now. The guy just doesn't have it. And you talk about age. People age differently, and Biden and I are about the same age. He's about a month older than I am, but I hope I'm more articulate than he is, and I'm demonstrating that on this program tonight.
I'd vote for you in a heartbeat. And that was the point I was making earlier, right? It's not about age. You bring a lot to the table when you're experienced.
Yeah,
it's him. He's the problem. he's a
problem.
Really big problem.
Well, the media sold him as a uniter, but he hasn't united anything.
He's done nothing but division. And I think his first campaign ad, I remember it like yesterday with the guys with the torches, the whole, good people on both sides lie that they were promoting. And he just continued the division from there. Cal Thomas, let everybody know how they could find your column and keep up with the wonderful work that you're doing and how they can get a copy of your new book.
Well, it's very kind, Rich. Thank you. Well, you can go to your local newspaper if they carry me. Unfortunately, more newspapers are shutting down than ever. But all my stuff is on my website, caltom.com. And, you can get the book in the usual places, sometimes even in bookstores, but Amazon, Books A Million, Barnes & Noble, the usual places. I appreciate the plug. Thanks.
You bet. Newspapers and bookstores. What are those? Guys, check it out, calthomas.com. Go to wherever you go and get it. Get 2 copies, one for you, one for a friend. Cal Thomas, Godspeed to you, and thanks for staying up late.
Delighted, Rich.
You bet. Thanks again. All right, folks, more to come straight ahead. We're going to talk with Katy Talento and find out what's going on about the war on babies. Don't go anywhere.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez.
All right, America, welcome back. And according to the feds, there are some hospitals that are denying emergency abortions. And this is obviously problematic. First of its kind, federal investigation has found 2 hospitals put pregnant women's lives in jeopardy and violated federal law by refusing to provide emergency abortions during premature labor. This is a crazy, crazy story. I want to get to the bottom of that with our guest, Katy Talento. She's executive director of the Alliance of Healthcare Sharing Ministries. Katy Talento, welcome.
Hi, thanks so much for having me.
I appreciate it. There's a lot going on with this war on babies, and I know that you were instrumental with the domestic policy in the last administration and been a leader in the forefront of this. So tell us what's going on. Take us right from the beginning.
Sure, Rich. Well, I think that what we're seeing is too many policies are coming out of the Biden administration that have just declared an absolute war on babies, whether they're already born babies with the FDA trying to poison them with heavy metals and baby food and not doing anything about the formula shortage, or you have this just outright attack on the dignity of human life, where they're suggesting that somehow abortion is medical treatment, which it never is. You never have to just perform an abortion in order to save a mother's life. We can support treating the mother. We can support even chemotherapy or a hysterectomy, whatever is necessary to save the mother's life. But you don't just say that the abortion alone is the medical care. That's just not the case medically or scientifically.
Let's talk about that, because, that's one of those things where I think there are a number of issues, politically speaking, where people will position something where there's only one outcome that is safe for people. For example, the debate over health of mother versus life of mother. When they have the wording, and they say, we should support scenarios where the mother's health is at risk, and then say no, it's the mother's life, and you're saying that's never or rarely the case. And I think this is where people who could be as pro-life as they want to be, but I think they feel like they're backed into a corner, and they want to say, look, I don't want people to die in any instance. Let this be the choice they make with their doctor and whatever when they have a situation like that. So what would a situation look like where you'd have to abort a baby in order to save a mother?
So you never have to abort a baby to save a mother. Sometimes you have to treat the mother, and that treatment may result as a secondary effect in the baby dying. For instance, if you have an ectopic pregnancy and you need to remove the baby's lodged in the mother's fallopian tube where it shouldn't be, and you have to remove that fallopian tube in order to save the life of the mother, of course, you're also removing the baby. But you're not going in, slicing up the baby into parts, vacuuming out the baby's parts like an abortion, right? You're not just solely going in there to kill the baby as some sort of life-saving treatment for the mother. No, you treat the mother with however you need to treat the mother, but the abortion is never the treatment. But sometimes the baby dies, unfortunately. But that's not the same thing as intentionally targeting the baby for death. Lots of times, if a mother is, for instance, experiencing gestational diabetes or some sort of serious complication, and then you deliver the baby, even if it's too early, honestly. But you have to do it to save the mother's life. You deliver the baby, and maybe the baby will live. Maybe the baby can get critical care and live, but maybe not. And even if the baby dies, at least you tried everything to keep both mom and baby alive. You didn't go in and target the baby for death. You never have to do that. You never have to just merely abort the baby, and that is a solution for mom.
This is a fascinating topic to me, because I agree with you 100% on this. And I feel like these become, for years I've always, wherever I go, they're like, oh, you talk about politics. But for me, it's more culture. It's more philosophy. And to me, that's the issue we're talking about now is physicians that believe in their Hippocratic oath to do no harm means deliver the baby and give the baby a fighting chance. Or do no harm means put the baby out of its misery because this is going to have no life. It's going to have a horrible quality of life, and the best thing we can do is abort it. And I think this becomes a question of how each physician individually views life. Am I right or wrong?
It really is true. I recently encountered a story of a mother who was told that her baby, she was pregnant, and her baby was had severe lethal deformities, and the baby was sort of curved in a U shape. It was just very deformed. Its organs, including the heart, were on the outside of the baby's body. And this woman was in a sort of liberal academic medical center that told her that there was no hope except to abort the baby, and that she could, if she wanted to, try to induce labor and deliver the baby, but there was no point in doing that because the baby was going to die, and it might not come out right, and they'd have to do a C-section anyway, and so it would be better to abort the baby. And this mom, she didn't know any better, and she had all these white coats telling her that this was the only way. But if she'd had the chance to talk to a pro-life OBGYN, she would have gotten a second opinion, and she would have heard about other families who had experienced a similar situation, including other families who'd experienced this exact same diagnosis for their baby. And yes, the baby did die, but they had a chance to deliver the baby naturally and hold their baby and comfort their baby in her last hour on Earth. And it was horrible and devastating, but it was also poignant and beautiful. And in a way that I think when you just, subject the baby to some sort of lethal injection and then dice the baby up in the mom's womb and suck the baby out with a vacuum, like that's what's happening when we're aborting these later term babies.
Mm-hmm.
It's not necessary, even in these tragic cases, it's not necessary to take that approach.
Katy Talento, I know that your background in epidemiology and you're an expert on this stuff, and I'm not. So I'll ask you this. It's my understanding that when this process occurs and they do that slicing action in the back of the baby's, where the spine is, the brainstem, and they vacuum out individual parts and whatnot, that these parts are then sold for quote-unquote research. Is this accurate?
So, yeah, it can be. Typically, the fetal tissue trafficking industry likes to have the organs very, very fresh, which is disgusting and horrible. But they don't want to crush the organs too much. So they try to deliver the baby as fully intact as they can, trying to kill the baby at the very last minute or keep the heart going as long as it can, because these organs aren't as useful for the ghoulish scientific research that they're engaging in when the baby's been dead for a little while longer by the time they get the organ harvested. So it's a disgusting, horrifying, horrendous situation, and trafficking in this type of fetal tissue, especially if it involves changing the abortion procedure in order to better harvest the organs, that is illegal. So we have seen some investigations for the Center for Medical Progress. David DeLayden's group has conducted a number of investigations showing that the University of Pittsburgh, for example, Medical Center, was engaged in precisely this type of procedure. They have the receipts. And so far, the Biden administration and, frankly, the Trump administration, after I left, was not engaging in any sort of investigation on this, unfortunately.
Yeah, this is fascinating to me because what you're describing explains why there seems to be, again, I look at things politically, and when you have a lobby and policy that, subsequently comes from this lobbying, like what former Virginia Governor Ralph Northam talked about, where, we should allow abortion to occur almost after the fact, where, some people are, and they suggested it in California as well, deliver the baby. It makes sense if there is a desire to have these intact organs, that they would say, all right, they'll deliver the baby and then we'll abort it. And I think this is egregious and, criminal, but it seems to be making its way into policy, right?
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, I live in Virginia, and I have never been so horrified as to hear my own governor, who is a pediatrician, talk about murdering children outside the womb who didn't quite die fast enough inside the womb when their parents tried to kill them. So, I will say that there were many reasons why Governor Northam was not reelected, and we're very grateful for that here in Virginia. But certainly that had to be one of them. It really activated the pro-life movement in Virginia. But yeah, this is a serious problem, and nobody's really paying attention to it. It was sort of trendy and fashionable to talk about the fetal parts trafficking industry a few years ago, but it seems to have fallen off the radar. It's still very much in progress. There are a number of NIH grants that where the researchers openly talk about that they will be using fetal tissue and that they're getting that fetal tissue from local Planned Parenthoods and other abortion mills.
All right. Well, Katy Talento, hang on right there, Executive Director of the Alliance of Healthcare Sharing Ministries. We're going to come right back and continue this discussion. Our phone number is 833-4-VALDEZ.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. This is America. This is Night. This
right, America, welcome back. We're on with Katy Talento. She was a top health advisor for the Trump White House Domestic Policy Council and former oversight investigator and legislative director for the United States Senate. And she's the executive director of the Alliance of Healthcare Sharing Ministries. Katy Talento, we left off on the discussion of the fetal organ trafficking industry, which you're saying is still alive and well, despite getting minimal press coverage.
Yeah, it's really depressing. I think about, the White House is not allowed to interfere in DOJ investigations. And so we were limited in our ability to be able to, basically hold DOJ's feet to the fire about this and push too hard. And, I guess we want that. That's sort of the ethical rules around, they allegedly don't want political pressure on the law enforcement process, but we see how that's kind of a joke these days. Of course, the law enforcement process has been totally politicized in our country now. And so these ethics rules seem so quaint that constrained us when we were in the White House. But, we weren't able to pressure DOJ to focus on this because we didn't want to cross that line. But it's a real tragedy that the Attorney General Barr at the time just didn't take on this issue sufficiently.
Yeah, and
certainly the Biden administration hasn't, of course.
Oh yeah, well that's what I was going to say. It's when the Biden administration took over, just a few months into the administration, they reversed most of the rules that the Trump administration had put on fetal tissue research, and I think you have to have rules somewhere, right? Otherwise, it becomes a blanket policy for kill first, ask questions later, and as I'm a dad, right? I think before becoming a dad, you can be very flip on certain issues and take a flippant approach to, making very life or death decisions. And you can make them in the snap of a finger. You're saying, well, if it's going to be a bad life for me, I might as well kill them up front. Forget giving them a chance. But I think once you get to know people and you have children and you fall in love with these children, you realize, I want every last second that I can get. And it's not so much about the quality of life. It is, I think, is a commitment to it, right? And I guess that this argument's made, and again, that's why I think it always comes back to philosophy. Same philosophy of, are you going to stay married just for the sake of your kids? It's better to have, happy parents that are separate than, unhappy parents that are together. And as if that was the only scenario that could exist. And I think we face that same thing in healthcare today. And I just wonder, does that chasm get wider, or is there a way to kind of meet in the middle?
Well, I think you're landing on something that's really important and that I think reflects sort of the deterioration of our Western civilization, which is that children don't have a lobby. They don't have a political voice, and they don't have a vote. And increasingly, that's why our laws and our culture and our norms have always prioritized children and put them first, because no one else will stand for them if the strong adults don't stand for the little and the weak ones who don't have a voice. And of course, the unborn have no voice at all, the least voice. But really, I think we've seen in the past few years just crossing new lines in this aspect of just assaulting children and prioritizing the strong adults and their needs over the weak children and their needs. And we've seen that with respect to our masking policies. I remember I'll never forget that video that kind of went viral during the pandemic when a little boy, a toddler at daycare, was resisting keeping a mask on his face. And, you had like 3 or 4 daycare workers who were just forcing him and just continuing to force him and almost torture this poor boy, forcing him to wear a mask. It was like a kidnapping video. It was just awful. Yeah. And, that's someone's little boy, and they had to see that video over and over again. They probably had a job they couldn't afford to quit, and, they had no choice except to put their child into this situation. And that was millions of parents facing that exact same situation. And then you had the students, especially those with learning needs and autism or speech development issues, who were going to schools and falling behind. We have many kids that were falling behind, not just those who were suffering with that kind of disability, but all children. They lost IQ points during this time. They lost, test scores. And it was really horrifying. And nobody was standing up for them, or at least no one who had a big enough stick, And so then, of course, we see the FDA, which. But
before we go into the next topic, Katy, I'm going to take a quick pause and we're going to come right back. 833-4-VALDEZ is the phone number. Our guest, Katy Talento. We're coming right back.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. Call now, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4-VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S.
And we continue our discussion on the war on children and babies with Katy Talento. She was top advisor to the Trump administration, the White House Domestic Policy Council. And Katy Talento, we left off right before the break. You were sharing with us yet another example of the attack on children.
Yeah, thanks so much, Rich. I think one of the really sort of scary things that has come out in recent weeks, but it's really a continuation of a longer story, is that the baby foods are being contaminated with heavy metals like lead and arsenic and cadmium. This is a really huge problem. It seems kind of technical, and I think many of us feel, powerless in the face of sort of contamination of our food supply. But this is something that the FDA really could do something about, and they've been asked to do something about it for almost a generation. I mean, for decades, really. This problem has been known, and really how it happens is water that's contaminated out in nature. It's contaminated with these chemicals, and it is used in the manufacturing practices of these giant food corporations. And yeah, so it gets into the supply, and these are rice cereals usually given to babies when they're weaning onto solid food off of breast milk or formula.
Oh, really? Is that where the metals are being found in rice cereal?
Yep, and rice cereal or oat cereals, but rice is really in particular because it needs a lot of water in order to be cooked, and so
and then the contaminated
problem.
water is where it comes into play. Wow,
Yep.
Katy Talento, quickly let everybody know how they could keep up to speed with what you're doing.
Yep, they can find me at Katy Talento with a Y, at Katy Talento on Twitter.
Outstanding. God bless you. Keep up the good work, and we'll do it again soon.
Thanks so much, Rich.
You're welcome. All right, don't go anywhere. Straight ahead, Open Phone America with me, Rich Valdez.
Live from the city that never sleeps. 17 miles from Madison Square Garden, New York City. It's America at Night with Rich Valdez, America's favorite late night talk program, featuring interesting guests from around the world and calls from across America. And now, here is your host, Rich Valdez.
Hi there, good evening, and what's up, America? I am Rich Valdez. This is Open Phone America, where we take calls from all across the country, and you get to sound off on all of the hot topics of the evening. And I want to give you the phone number, invite you to call 833-482-5337. 833-4-VALDEZ is my phone number. If you want to give me a call, we also have the Legacy line open, 866-505-4626. Now, lots of stuff to talk about. We've talked about a lot of things this evening. We've talked about the hero cop that sprinted towards the shooter in Texas. Of course, I'm talking about a mall shooting in Texas by Mauricio Garcia, and we'll get into that momentarily. We also we talked about the state of the media in America with Cal Thomas and talking about how the media has been covering for Biden, yet Biden says, no, it's the media that makes you think I'm not doing a good job. No, sir, it's you that make us think you're not doing a good job. It's a terrible job that you're doing. And I it's a great time to be a conservative because I think, wherever I get into these conversations, wherever I go, people always, they want you to, basically do your show on demand. And I tell them, look, no, call the show. But I will tell them, I go, I mean, are you supporting Biden? And, it puts them in a tough spot because nobody wants to support this guy. And obviously, because nobody wants that kind of lifestyle. And many of them are honest and say, you know what? It was better when Trump was around. And yeah, that's the truth. But we talked about that. We also talked about how the industry, or what our guest Katy Talento called the traffickers of fetal organs. This industry continues to thrive. It's still alive and well. It's an industry I didn't even know existed, to be frank with you. So that was part of our discussion tonight as well. And we're going to talk about some other stuff. There's a fascinating story out of Utah, right? This is NBC News in Utah, ABC News Channel 4 in Utah. And listen to this, abc4.com is the website. This Utah woman wrote a book about grief following her husband's death. So local author, she was making the rounds, promoting her book because her beloved husband had passed away. And it's now come to be found that she, Corey Rishens is her name, is now being charged with the murder of that husband that she wrote the book on grief for or about. And this is coming out of Camas, Utah. This Kansas woman, Camas, Utah woman, who her name again, Corey, Kouri, Richins, Richins, wrote a children's book about coping with grief following the death of her husband. She was charged with murder today, or at least Monday. This final hour in New York. If you're in New York, you know that we're already in Tuesday. If you're listening on the West Coast, then we're still on Monday. But Corey Rishens was arrested on May 8th, Summit County, for aggravated murder and 3 counts of possession of drugs with intent to distribute. The alleged murder, occurred on March 3rd, 2022. Her husband, Eric Rishens, died March 4th, and his obituary claimed that he died unexpectedly. And they were married for 9 years. He had 3 sons with her. The document charges Corey with murder, and they were originally sealed, but now they've been unsealed. According to court records, a relative of Eric had filed for guardianship of their children, and this man was found dead at the foot of his bed, according to the police's charging documents. They were celebrating her closing on a house for her business. She said she made him a Moscow Mule in the kitchen and brought it to their bedroom where he drank it in bed. And shortly after she went to put the kids to bed, she told police she woke up around 3 a.m. and that he was cold to the touch. So, this is an interesting story. She told him she left her phone plugged in her bedroom while she was with the child. However, the phone showed it was locked and unlocked multiple times and that there was movement on the phone. There were also several messages sent and received during this time frame, but those messages were deleted. Following an autopsy, it was determined that Eric died from an overdose of fentanyl. The medical examiner said the amount of fentanyl in his system was approximately 5 times the lethal dosage, meaning 5 times what it would take to kill you. She gave him 5. She was making sure this guy wasn't living. And I'm sorry to hear it. According to the medical examiner, the fentanyl was ingested orally. So she made him a Moscow Mule, I'm going to surmise, with fentanyl, a side of fentanyl. Would you like that on the rocks, honey? No, I'd like it with fentanyl. Unbelievable. After the autopsy, a search warrant was obtained for the residence. Several computers and Corey's phone were seized as evidence. According to the charging documents, Corey had contacted her friend several times asking if she could get a prescription for pain medication for an investor who had a back injury. Hydrocodone pills were left at a house that she was selling, and Corey left the cash for them. 2 weeks later, Corey came out to the same friend and asked if she could get something stronger, some of the medicine Michael Jackson was on. Corey legitimately said this. They're quoting, some of the Michael Jackson stuff is what she asked for. She specifically asked her friend for fentanyl. On February 11th, the friend gave Corey 15 or 20 fentanyl pills, which she reportedly paid $900 for. A few days later, on February 14th, Eric and Corey had Valentine's Day dinner at their home in Camas, Utah. The charging document said. Then shortly after dinner, Eric became very ill and told a friend he thought his wife was trying to poison him. 2 weeks after this incident, on February 26, Corey contacted her friend again and asked for another $900 worth of fentanyl pills. The friend left the pills at the same house that she was selling. She's in the house flipping business. And 6 days later, on March 4th, he was found dead of a fentanyl overdose. Now, she was made her rounds in the media after his death. She wrote a book helping kids deal with grief. The book focuses on how to cope with the loss of a loved one, and it was released after the death of her husband. In the description of her book, it said this book follows the story of a child who lost their father, but who is reminded that his presence still exists all around them, just like an angel watching over them. While navigating the grief of her husband's death, Corey said she wrote the book because she needed a distraction and a way to channel her family's feelings. Wow. I'm guessing this happens all the time, but I just find it fascinating that, it still happens. Just fascinating to me. Anyway, I guess maybe I'm the naive one that doesn't think that wives kill their husbands. Maybe I got lucky just getting divorced. Anyway, your calls and more on everything we're talking about. 833-4-VALDEZ. We'll be right back.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. Call now, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4-VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S.
Rich Valdez, who again will do a fine job, and I know you'll enjoy listening to it.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez.
So one of the reasons that this story is really hitting a nerve is because this man appeared to be having mental health issues. This is something that you've talked a lot about. But I want to read to you, this is a response from the comptroller, Brad Lander. He tweeted this: New York City is not Gotham. We must not become a city where mentally ill human can be choked to death by a vigilante without consequence. There's also this from Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, the Democratic Congresswoman. She said, Jordan Neely was murdered. What is your response to what they're saying here?
Well, both the Congresswoman and the controller is a citywide leader. And I don't think that's very responsible at the time where we're still investigating the situation. Let's let the DA conduct his investigation with the law enforcement officials. To really interfere with that is not the right thing to do. And I'm going to be responsible and allow them to do their job and allow them to determine exactly what happened here.
Eric Adams is saying that Congresswoman AOC, all out crazy, my least favorite Congresswoman from the Bronx and Queens, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, that she is interfering, along with the controller of the city of New York, interfering, his word, not mine, in the investigation by DA Alvin Bragg into what happened here. And again, thus far, this individual, the a veteran Marine, has not been charged. Now, as I'm speaking to you, I'm looking at a video of protests today on subway platforms, on the streets, all over the city of New York with respect to this, what some are calling vigilantism, others are calling, Good Samaritan, that got into an altercation with this Jordan Neely, who choked him out, and the guy died. That's simple. And I got to tell you, the rear naked choke is probably my choke of choice. If in a close quarter situation. Not that I do this on a regular basis. I'm an armchair quarterback, if you will, but that's where I would go if I had to. And I think it's a horrific situation. Just imagine somebody gets stupid with your wife or your kid. You're like, hey, relax. They swing at you. You dodged a punch. You come in swiftly, put a rear naked choke on him. The guy falls asleep. Next thing you know, he never wakes up. What a nightmare scenario that is, right? Absolutely nightmarish. I don't think anybody wants that to happen. The whole thing is horrific. And again, back to people being mentally ill, just like the shooter that we were talking about in the first hour, and we can continue that discussion as well. But I want to get your thoughts on this, about the protests that are going on and all of this overall. Let's go to the phones, 833-4-VALDEZ, 833-482-5337. Andy's in Auburn, New York on WAUB. Andy, go right ahead. You're on with Rich Valdez. Welcome.
Hey, well, first of all, real quick, hearing Jimbo's voice, I love that man, and it breaks my heart that he's dead. You're doing a good job.
Thank you.
No offense, but I miss him.
It should not offend me that you tell me I'm doing a good job.
No, well, that I miss him. Anyway.
Well, it should not offend me that you miss him either.
Well, good. All right, well, I'm a Democrat. And I will continue to be a Democrat. And I want, so you know where I'm coming from, I want the Democrats to control government, okay, because I'm an environmentalist. So 2 points. First of all, this woke stuff is going to kill us, the Democratic Party. It's going to destroy us. It's not a good idea to just alienate so many people by constantly this sanctimonious saturation drumbeat of if you're non-white or GLBTQ, you are a hero just for being non-white or GLBTQ. And just the subject, if you turn on NPR, and I recommend anybody do this, turn on NPR. If they're not talking about race or GLBTQ, start a stopwatch. Within 5 minutes, they will be talking about race or GLBTQ. They'll shoehorn it into some other topic, or they'll find some way to divert the conversation into it. It's race, GLBTQ all day long, every day. Anyway.
Yeah, listen, Andy, I agree with you. And I think I support. I'm not one of those guys, the voices in the wind that you hear from time to time said, the problem with America is the two-party system. The problem, listen, if that was such a problem, somebody would be fixing it, right? I believe problems can be fixed. I like the two-party system. I like choice. If there's third choice, go for it. Why not? I believe that these choices are good, and I think we should have a robust Democrat Party and a robust Republican Party. I really do. A robust Republican Party is one where there's every color of the rainbow in it, and same as the Democrats. And you have contrast on every issue, and that's fine. We can debate all the issues. I agree with you that when you start to alienate people, and you're not the only one that says this. There's an economist who I respect greatly, who one of the highlights of my career was I had a private conversation with him once for 6 or 7 minutes, Thomas Sowell. And Dr. Thomas Sowell said, in so many words, he's really eloquent, but he said that if we continue to divide society and divide people, like divide by like you just mentioned, gay, lesbian, bisexual, transgender, questioning, plus queer, and just keep granulating this more and more, he said, ultimately, you've made it so granular that you're back at individualism, which is where the conservative Republicans have always saying we should be. And he's saying that you are going to, if you keep up with this politics of exclusion, you're going to push right into your enemy's hands or your opponent's hands. And I think he's right, and I think you're saying the same thing, that this wokeism is going to destroy the Democrat Party, and because by and large, white people make up the biggest part of that party. And it seems that they've made white people public enemy number one. And you're right. It's race and gender, which is why critical race theory, critical gender theory, or critical queer theory, I think it's called now, are the staples of what they do, even in the media. And if you look at the what happened today with the shooting, it's a shooting that happened on Saturday. It's a shooting that they talked about on Sunday, but it became a national event when they said that this guy was focused on race. And it was because he had hatred towards certain racial groups. And again, it may be true, it may not be. But I feel like that was the angle that they needed or they were looking for or hoping for in order to continue this racist, white supremacist agenda. And again, if it's real, it's real. And that's horrible. You know, I've never met a Nazi I've liked, right? So I'm not defending that in any way. But Andy, I think you make a really good point.
Am I still on?
Of course.
Okay, good. Related, the subway thing. Okay, now either party, like I said, I don't have internet or television, so I'm radio all day long. I go from NPR to right-wing radio, back and forth, and it drives me nuts when I realize they're trying to propagandize me, either side. The subway thing. Not once on NPR did they mention that the guy who got choked to death had a history which included punching an old lady in the head hard enough to give her brain damage and blind her permanently in one eye.
Yeah.
They never mention that. But they do mention he's black, of course. And if he was GLBTQ, they would mention that. But they don't mention anything else. And the right-wing radio, they don't mention that, because I brought this up with another liberal friend, and, you know, she is going to...
You got like 10 seconds before the music comes in, so make it as quick as
well,
you
they
can.
never mentioned that the guy could have waited 2 minutes to the next stop and then got a police officer.
Yeah. Well, and again, listen, that's why we're here to have those discussions and have that. Andy, thank you for the call. The music means they're kicking me out, but I appreciate the call and keep listening. I think you're going to enjoy what you're hearing. We try to talk about things from every angle. 833-4-VALDEZ, your calls and more coming up next with me, Rich Valdez.
Call now, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4-VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S.
Pay the debt, cut the check, or no reparations, no vote 2024.
If you are running for office, do not think you are going to win your election if you don't have a concrete plan for reparations. Biden, do not seek a second term unless it's accompanied by an executive order for reparations for descendants of American chattel slavery.
So now this is a threat to the current sitting president, the man that they put in office, to say, if you don't make this a nationwide executive order, you don't get back in the White House. I mean, this is over the top.
All right, and that's a correspondent from Fox News, because California reparations, their panel on reparations, has approved payments of up to $1.2 million for every black resident. California's legislature could vote on the panel's recommendations relatively soon. Now, the task force held a public meeting in Oakland, California on Saturday. You heard some of the audio there, and voted on the final set of recommendations to be sent to their state legislators. The 9-member panel called on the state to offer its black residents a formal apology in the addition to the payments, saying, quote, reparations are not only morally justifiable, but they have the potential to address long-standing racial disparities and inequalities, said Congresswoman Barbara Lee from California. And she said so right after the meeting. So that's where we are on reparations. Now, this panel's recommendation breaks down different types of payments based on historical discrimination. For instance, black residents affected by redlining by banks would receive $3,300 for each year they lived in California from the 1930s through the 1970s, amounting to $148,000 total. Similarly, black residents could receive roughly $2,300 a year in compensation for over-policing and mass incarceration for each year they lived in California between 1970 and 2020. Those payments could amount to $115,000. In total, these and other payments included in the plan, one black California man who's 71 years old and has lived in California his entire life, as an example here, could receive up to $1.2 million, according to analysis from the New York Times. So that's where we are on reparations in California. I'm interested in your thoughts on that, as well as everything else we're talking about. Let's see here. Let's go to Michael in Pendleton, Oregon, KUMA. Michael, you're on with Rich Valdez. Welcome.
Good evening, Rich. Great show again. Yes,
Thank you.
You always have great guests, as Jim Bohannon did also. And a lot of your callers I love to listen to, including Gil from the Philippines. I think he's great. And of course, this is a hot button issue, the abortion issue. And I want to qualify in the beginning, I care about and I respect all my fellow Americans. They have a right to their opinion. And I know the pro-choice people and the women, they say it's their choice. I hear what they're saying there, but my concern, my prayer is that they'll kind of see it from this angle also, Rich, that, somebody has to stand up for that unborn life. What about them? And, if you're aborted, you're not going to live your life. And so, so I always appreciate the pro-life support of Presidents Reagan, President Trump, and that your last guest that you had the last hour, I'm concerned about that too, Rich. The forces that are working against the rights of children and of the unborn. And I believe in having a peaceful, respectful dialogue with people on both sides of it. But I'm proud of my local church. We have strong support for the pro-life side of it. I thank you for your support in the past for that, Rich. And like I said, but President Reagan had a saying once. He said, well, I note that the people who are for abortion are all alive. They haven't gone through an abortion. I remember Reagan saying that.
Just to chime in there, Michael, what's interesting is that Reagan, when he said that, again, this was one of those things in the 80s that I heard that really helped form my opinions in life. Just like, I'm the scariest words in the English language. I'm from the government. I'm here to help. Or one we talked about earlier, guns don't kill people, people kill people. These very, very, very smart slogans, and they're all, in my opinion, true. And you're right. Everybody that's for abortion is still alive. They haven't been aborted. So it's very convenient, right? And this is a debate that won't go anywhere. It's a debate where there's plenty of back and forth. But I believe in life, and many times, depending on the issue, the more severe, the more I think we err on the side of caution, right? When it comes to issues of life. My dad, my mom, these were interesting scenarios, just to share a little bit. When my mom became ill, before she was ill, she had all of her mental faculty. She was fine. And she always said, look, you can treat me. I just don't want to be resuscitated if I die. I'm a DNR, which doesn't mean do not treat, because some people will take it the wrong way, and they'll be like, oh, they're DNR, don't do anything. That doesn't mean don't do anything. You treat very aggressively. You just don't resuscitate. You can also add a do not intubate to that. And again, these are people's choices, and they should be respected. And because in those situations, you sometimes can't come back from them. Right, you could end up putting somebody in one of these persistent vegetative states where they may not even be tortured per se. It may not be cruel. It just may be a perpetual state of them not really being alive. quote unquote being alive. And it's a very interesting thing. And when my dad became ill and then had a series of pretty massive strokes, I remember asking several doctors, what is going on? What's the prognosis? Is my dad ever going to get better? And they would not answer. I mean, they would give me this song and dance, say, well, we can't really tell, blah, 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 blah. And I would be left with more questions than the answer I was looking for. And they finally, and I complained, and I said, look, I want a second opinion. And I asked this man who was the chief of neurology at the hospital, and I said, what's going on here? And he said, well, let me bring you my top person, under him. And this woman came in, and she was a South Asian, and she also gave me this very political non-answer. And I asked her, what would you do if this were your dad? And she said, well, I can't get into personal things. And I said, why not? This is personal for me. You're supposed to be giving me advice. And she said, well, I wouldn't be in this position. Our culture, we don't bring our elderly family members to a hospital in a situation like this. We care for them at home, and we allow them to live out their days at home. And that helped me somewhat to realize, okay, so live out your days means he's dying. That was the answer to my question. I was asking, is my dad dying, or is he going to get better? Because I'm not getting an answer. And that was after a lot of pressure, but she was still, somewhat vague. Then he comes in. I asked him the same question. And he had the guts, and he looked at me, and he put his hand on my shoulder, and he said, to keep your dad alive beyond God's calling him home through this stroke would be torture. And I said, wow, the first straight answer I've gotten ever. And I said, so when can I expect him to die? And he said, if we do nothing and we don't he said, if we don't feed him, we don't, hydrate him and all these things that he should be able to do on his own, that he can't do on his own, then he's probably got about 5 days. And he said, and this is where palliative care becomes an option. And, you help him to manage, any discomfort that may be associated with that process of hospice. And I thought, man, that sounds cruel. Like, I'm not going to feed or give my dad water and just let him die, versus feeding him and giving him water and then letting him live in a state where he can't swallow on his own. It would have been a feeding tube. Lord knows how long he would have lived in that scenario. And the question, and again, I don't have the answer. I just know I knew my dad, and he wouldn't have gone for that. So I said, no, we're going to, let him, we're going to go with this palliative care. And that would be what he would want to do. But I say all of that to say that these instances of life and death are so complicated and so shrouded by emotion and by other information that it's always good to have, like you said, a respectful dialogue where we can really have a discussion, because ultimately it's one's philosophy and what one believes on, are we dealing with the carcass of a human, or is this a living, breathing person that will maybe pass away in body but live eternally in their spirit, depending on what your beliefs are. And it's comforting to deal with people, even though they're scientists, that understand these interesting nuances and can explain their science, or at least stand behind the science and give you an answer. And lamentably, I think sometimes we don't get the answers we'd like, even from the scientists. So it's hard to even follow the science. But that's where I'm at, Michael. And I thank you for your kind words and for what you shared. I really do appreciate it. All right, Michael hung up. Well, thank you, Michael. We'll take a pause right here, come back to your calls and more. We've got calls from Michigan, Indiana, West Virginia, and New York. Straight ahead.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. Call now, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4-VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S. He's brown, he's bald, and he's breaking it down. It's America at Night with Rich Valdez.
All right, America, welcome back. Let's go to Charleston, West Virginia, WCHS, and check in with Tommy. Hey, Tommy, you're on with Rich Valdez. Welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Valdez, for this opportunity.
Yes, sir.
I found that the reparations report in California, and it was very interesting, especially the point of chattel slavery.
Mm-hmm.
What's that mean? Well, that means
the reference of owning people as property.
Right, as opposed to indentured slavery.
Mm-hmm.
Please understand that in this nation's history, in sometime after 1600, not too long afterwards, before the African or transatlantic slave trade began, the mother country, closest thing we have to one, of Great Britain, England, sent, in the course of 100 years, an easy 50,000 convicts to the Americas to serve out their sentences as wards of sort of whatever planter. And they did labor. The number of indentured slaves, who were people, if when Cromwell had conquered Ireland.
We're going to run out of time, Tommy. Speed it up.
Okay, you're talking about hundreds of thousands of people, 7 years. Approximately half of those people died before their 7 years.
Their term was up. Yeah.
Why is it that they are not included in this concept?
Right, in the reparations. Yeah. Yeah, I think it makes a lot of sense. Listen, it's fascinating, right? Because I don't support this idea at all. I think that these people that are laying a claim to a legitimate grievance, right? It's a legitimate grievance. Slavery was wrong, both indentured servitude, both the chattel slavery, all of that. However, how could you lay claim to something that you didn't experience, right? I mean, I can't cash in on a class action lawsuit that I wasn't aggrieved by. That's what's happening here. They're not the aggrieved party. They just have to say, I'm a black person that, and I happen to have been alive from 1970 till now, for whatever years I've been alive, I can now cash in on this. And I think this is preposterous. It's just crazy to think that just because you are black, you can cash in on slavery. I mean, it would have made sense, to those people who were actually the aggrieved party. And I don't think that we could say, well, we're somehow related or ancestors. I mean, come on. This is a laughable situation, and not because of what it is, but because of how they're approaching it. At least that's my thought. I think we lost Tommy in the midst of that. But thank you for your call, brother. Big shout out to everybody in West Virginia. And we're going to continue with your calls from Albany, New York, Shields, Michigan, Bedford, Indiana, and more straight ahead. I'm Rich Valdez.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. America at Night with Rich Valdez.
Sarah in Bedford, Indiana, WBIW. You're on with Rich Valdez. Go right ahead.
Hey, thanks for having me. I want to say real quick, I'm in no way justifying the atrocities that happened in Texas with that mall shooter. However, the left, with the promotion of their version of racism and sexism and, their prejudices that they promote, I think are in part responsible for radicalizing people. And they need to look in the mirror and look at their own prejudices because there's no middle ground anymore. There's no colorblind society, or they're not trying to promote justice. They're demanding reparations, and the solution they offer is horrible. And I've got to say this: the incel movement, I think, in part, is a response to what I call female supremacy. And if we're going to get along, we've got to drop judging each other by your sex or your race and stuff. And the left is not doing that. So thank you for having me on.
Point. You're welcome, Sarah. Excellent points. I think I agree with you 100%. If we continue to go down that road, allowing society to be fragmented in this way, we will never, ever get away from this. Let's see. It's 56. All right, let's go with Phil, Butte, Montana, KXTL, quickly.
Hey, yes, thanks, Rich. I just wanted to make a quick comment on reparations. I think it's ludicrous. And when will it end? After child after child after child? One more quick comment. When are we going to start dropping the African American? We know you're black. You're just an American, not African American.
Well, again, this is another instance of nuance. It's one of those things where people are proud of their heritage. For years I grew up with people that would say they were, Irish Catholic. And it was important for them because there was a big Protestant movement and there was a big rift, obviously, with the Northern Ireland and whatnot. So it was important for them to identify. Again, I think the idea of Latino and Latina and now Latinx, these terms were all kind of derived by white academics looking to create something other than the assimilation of everybody melting into the melting pot of Americanism. And I agree with you. But I also celebrate people's individualism. And if somebody wants to say that they're African American, Black American, Haitian American, Ukrainian American, whatever type of American they want to be because they like to eat a certain meal a certain way, a certain time, and celebrate a certain way, then I'm all for that too, because I love cultural celebrations. And I love rice and beans and all the food of my culture. So to me, I'm one of those guys that says, hey, live and let live. But you're right. I see all of us as Americans. And I think when we get cut, we should all bleed red, white, and blue. At least that's my vision for the country. Anyway, sorry to anybody who's still on hold. The music means they're kicking us out, but I'll be back again tomorrow. Take care. Good night. God bless. Hasta la próxima.